I don't have my light on. There we go. So the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg was pretty exciting, huh? Indycar has officially started its 2022 season with the opening round in St. Petersburg. One interesting fact, actually, about this race is that it was the most watched IndyCar opener in 11 years, according to IndyCar's website and NBC. They say it brought in 1.4 million views. It also happens to be the most watched non-Indy 500 race in 11 years. It looks like IndyCar is growing and the fans are enjoying seeing close wheel-to-wheel racing, as IndyCar has been doing a pretty good job at for the past few years, honestly. So let's get into what made this race interesting and, in my opinion, so good. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch the race. You really should. I think you should give IndyCar a try because it's a super exciting series. Lots of amazing drivers. I think Tatiana Calderon said that champions race here, which I think is actually really cool because there's champions from all over, from all kinds of different motorsports, all racing in IndyCar. All right, starting with qualifying. During qualifying, it shaped up to be a classic battle between Will Power and Colton Herta. These two drivers have been pretty consistent here at this track when it comes to raw speed in qualifying. And we saw a really big battle forming between some of the big teams like Andretti and Penske. Chip Ganassi was struggling a little bit in qualifying, as they have done in the past with street circuits, but they weren't that far off. This is something they need to work on a little bit. After proceeding through the first two rounds of qualifying, we got into the top 12, with Will Power achieving the fastest time. Colton Herta was just behind, with Scott McLaughlin and Roman Grosjean really close within the top 5. Now, the really exciting bits didn't happen until we got into the Firestone Fast 6. Our fastest 6 drivers were battling it out, with Will Power and Colton Herta putting in some really fast times. IndyCar brought in a new soft compound tire, which is the red walled tire. There's black tires and there's red tires. The red ones are grippier and faster, and the black ones are not as grippy, but they last longer than the red ones, so there's a trade-off. Anyway, Firestone brought in these new red tires, and they provide quite a bit more grip, which we've seen faster times in St. Petersburg this year than last year, which is really cool to see. There's more of a gap between the two tires, more strategic elements that could happen in a race, which we'll talk about later. So Will Power and Colton Herta, they were definitely dominating the session. As the track temperature started to climb, the laps started to get a little bit slower. Just before that, though, Scott McLaughlin put in a super fast lap at 59.482, out qualifying Will Power by 0.123 seconds, gaining his first pole position. He just snuck in there. It was a really good lap, and none of the other drivers could compete with it after that. So, nice job, Scott McLaughlin. And this is pretty impressive considering that Will Power has had 9 pole positions at this track. 9. That's insanely impressive. So for the race start, we have a Penske 1-2 and a driver who has never started on pole position in an IndyCar race. Out front of the field, we've got some pretty exciting stuff going into the race start. Really good stuff for a season opener. Moving on to the race start, the field comes around the final corner, and McLaughlin gets a pretty good start, and Will Power alongside him just drops back all of a sudden. He didn't get a very good start, and I think that has to do with he started on the black tires. He was trying to shake up his strategy a little bit and be on a different cycle than Scott McLaughlin. And sometimes you gotta try stuff like that if new tires come into play or something, or you want to try to gain advantage somewhere else in the race. So I think it was just the black tires that dropped Will Power back a little bit. He kind of got swallowed up by a few cars. But then again, he was one of the only drivers in the top part of the field that had the black tires on. So that's understandable. It didn't have too much to do with Will Power's fault at the start. Coming into turn 1, for a second, I thought that Herta and McLaughlin were going to have some contact. It was a pretty aggressive move, by Herta, but it was a really good move, a respectable move for sure. They didn't collide though. Herta kept out of it and tried to make a move happen on the outside, which would have given him the inside for turn 2, which is a pretty decent way to get past the car if you're coming into turn 1. But ultimately, Scott McLaughlin just kept his cool. He defended his position and he led going into turn 2. And after 5 laps, he extended his lead to 1.5 seconds. So far, so good for our new IndyCar leader. The first pit stops started happening at laps 9 through 13. And this is the point in the race where we got some different strategy involved. These drivers that were coming in around this time were definitely committing to a 3-stop strategy. I'm pretty sure the reason for this was some of the drivers just wanted to get off those reds because they were wearing out pretty fast. I'm pretty sure the thought was, if I get rid of these reds now, I'll be on the blacks and I'll be a lot faster and could go longer into the race while other drivers suffer on the reds and try to extend their pit window. In hindsight, this really did look like a good strategy because around lap 19, Rinus VeeKay was really struggling on the used reds. He was getting attacked from at least 3 drivers and I think lost 3 positions in the meantime. And that just goes to show that these red tires really do provide a ton of grip, but they fade away pretty fast. You kind of have to get past this zone where they're fading away to try to get to the point where you can kind of just sit on them and extend their life a little bit, even though they're not as grippy. And really, this makes McLaughlin's run out front even more impressive. Power started to close on him 1 second a lap, but I think that was because McLaughlin was taking care of his tires. He wasn't pushing too hard. When he was out front, he was controlling the race. He really didn't need to push super hard because he had Power a little bit behind him. So he was kind of just saving his tires and letting Power get closer to him because Power had to use more of his tires. So McLaughlin definitely had it under control at this point for sure, even though Power was closing. At lap 25, we got our first full course caution. David Malukas crashed into the barrier by going wide in turn 4. He got into the marbles and it just sent him into the wall and he couldn't turn in. This really was kind of a gift for the drivers on the 2-stop strategy because then they could slow down, cruise, and they didn't have to use all their tires up, which means they could extend their stint even more. The pit lane opened on lap 28 and we got a flurry of cars coming in to change tires. Among those drivers stopping were the top 2, McLaughlin and Power. After their stops, they came out so close to each other. I mean, they were super close. At lap 34, we got our restart with Dixon and Rossi leading. And I think McLaughlin and Power were around the bottom portion of the top 10 or just outside of it, albeit they were on a different strategy. So effectively, they were still leading the race, even though Dixon and Rossi were out front because they were going to have to make more pit stops because they already committed to a 3-stop, except for Rossi. He had some other issues. At lap 34, we got a restart with Dixon and Rossi leading. And I think McLaughlin and Power were around the top 10 or just outside the top 10, albeit on a different strategy. So even though Dixon and Rossi were leading, effectively McLaughlin and Power were still the leaders just because they had less stops to do. At lap 49, Dixon eventually went into the pits, and here was when we see the 3-stop strategy. We just saw it wasn't gonna work. It was just too much with drivers extending their stints on their used tires. Chip Ganassi was one of the teams that really split their strategy between their 2 drivers, and we could really see that the 2-stop was working way better because Palou was in a much better position than Dixon. So 2 stops, definitely the way to go. After lap 60, we could see that the drivers were pushing so hard to make a 2-stop happen because they knew if I can make a 2-stop, I will definitely benefit from this. And that shows in the results because all the 2-stoppers, minus Rossi, finished higher than the 3-stoppers. So at this point, VeeKay was really eking out his tires with McLaughlin behind, hoping for a yellow to help with his tire wear. After a few laps, both of these drivers went into the pits. McLaughlin came out with a comfortable lead over VeeKay, but there was still Palou to worry about because he was clocking in a pretty fast in-lap, and at this point Palou was in a shot to win the race. He worked his way up the field and got himself into a nice position. This is really good on Palou's part because he started, it looks like he started 10th. So that's really impressive. So after pitting, Palou came out super close behind McLaughlin. And at this point, this is where we got treated to a late race battle between McLaughlin and Palou. They're both super quick. Lap after lap, Palou was just closing the gap little by little every lap. And we saw lap traffic definitely played a part in this race, because each time McLaughlin got up to a lapped car, Palou would just instantly catch up. In IndyCar, you're not forced to get out of the way if you're a lapped car like you are in Formula One. Formula One has the blue flags. To when you're being lapped, you have to move out of the way for the leaders. But in IndyCar, you don't have to. You have all the right to stay on the lead lap. You still got to work for those overtakes, even if technically that car you're trying to pass is behind you, which can make for some really good racing. I actually wish Formula One did this. I'm sure that this made McLaughlin nervous with Palou, last year's champion, mind you, right behind him. Also, Power at this point was closing really fast on the top two because the lapped cars were just slowing these guys down, and Power was just able to gain all of this time back. So potentially we were almost in with a shot with a 3-car battle for the lead. That would have been pretty exciting. But the top two battling was still super entertaining to watch. With 3 laps to go, Palou came super close to McLaughlin, but overall it just wasn't enough. And when the checker flag flew, it was McLaughlin who came across the finish line in first, and he got his first ever IndyCar victory. And honestly, I couldn't be happier. He really deserved it. I mean, he put it on pole. He beat Will Power at a track he's super dominant at. He held off Alex Palou, last year's champion. He stayed cool, calm, and collected, and won his first IndyCar race. I mean, he is a 3-time Australian V8 Supercars champion for Team Penske, actually, which is the team that he just won his first IndyCar race for, which I also think is super cool. So I think McLaughlin absolutely has what it takes to become an IndyCar champion. I think we're going to see a lot from him this season. I hope so. It would be really cool to see him battle Palou for the championship. Now, what I would like to do is I'm going to pull up the results here for the race. And I'm just going to work down the order. I'm not going to touch on every driver, but if there's a driver that I think is worth talking about, or things they achieved during the race, or just things that I want to see them do during the season, this is the part of the video where I'm just going to reflect on how the drivers are doing just by looking at the running order. So let's start with the podium. The winner, we all know, Scott McLaughlin. Super good performance. Started on pole position, brought the win home for a Team Penske, which I'm sure he's super excited about. It's always an honor to win for these really big teams in IndyCar. He led 49 laps, which is really impressive. So, hands to Scott McLaughlin for winning the race. Great job. Moving on to position 2, we got Alex Palou. He started 10th, worked his way up to 2nd, and that's, in my book, is pretty incredible. Can I just say that Alex Palou, he is really becoming just an incredible driver. I know he won the championship last year, and that was incredible, and we all knew he was mega talented even before that championship, but he's just really come into his own. He won last year 3 times and became champion, and this year we can see he's just on form. Even though Chip Ganassi had a very difficult time setting up the car for a street track, Alex still worked his way through it and got a 2nd place right behind the leader. So I think he's also in a shot to win the championship again. I mean, he went through all the difficulties of driving that car to finish 2nd, so he's also a championship favorite. Him and McLaughlin, I think. Super good performance. And to round off the podium, we have Will Power. Always a great, just super impressive. He did go down a position, but that's okay. It had something to do with the strategy and starting on the black tires. Maybe he could have been up there if he was on the same strategy as McLaughlin. When he has his day, though, he's always super fast. And I'm hoping that Will Power is going to be up there all year, because we've had some seasons where we've seen Will Power just have technical failures in the car. It's just stuff out of his control that just damages his season. I really hope that Will Power is just able to stay up there with the young guys, because I think it'd be really cool to see him within a shot. Next, we have some of the last drivers to be on a 2-stop strategy. We got Colton Herta. He put in a really good race. We got Romain Grosjean. He had a few mistakes. He did pretty good in the race, though. He started 5th, and he finished 5th. So, I mean, that's all you can ask. Then we have VK, who really extended those tires. He did qualify 4th and went down a couple positions, but he did get swallowed up mid-race by a few drivers trying to eke out those tires. But he did good. He did good for what he had. And then we have the last of the 2-stoppers, Graham Rahal. He started 11th and climbed to 7th. So that just shows that Graham Rahal, on a good day, he can really put in the results. And I definitely want to see that Rahal team up there with the big guys. They have won the Indy 500 a couple times in recent memory. So I would really like to see them out the sharp end of the field all season long. That would be super cool. Now we start with the drivers that had the 3-stop strategy, and the highest position for a 3-stop driver was Scott Dixon at position 8. You can never count out Scott Dixon. I mean, he is just the best on fuel management, really good on tires, and overall race pace, even when Chip Ganassi was suffering this weekend. And yeah, he was on the back foot kind of when you compare him to Alex Palou, because Scott Dixon had the 3-stop strategy, which ended up not being the way to go. But he still finished the highest out of all the drivers on the 3-stop strategy. And I think that says a lot. Like, Dixon still has a lot to offer to the IndyCar championship. And I think if the strategy went better, he could have been up there at the sharp end of the field, even though Chip Ganassi was suffering a little bit this week. So I think we're going to see more from our champion, Scott Dixon, this year. I definitely think he'll finish higher than 8th and hopefully bag a couple wins. We'll see. Next, we have a couple other people down the field like Pato O'Ward and Jack Harvey. I really think their race kind of got screwed up and they potentially could have been higher. I mean, Jack Harvey got the short end of the stick in qualifying. He definitely could have been higher. He started 23rd and he climbed to 13th. Jack Harvey just always impresses. Like, he has this way of having a crappy qualifying and just turning it into a way better result in the race. So if he starts higher up, he could definitely be a threat for race wins. Absolutely, and I want to see that. We have some high-profile names, too, that kind of finished lower down, like Helio Castroneves, Simon Pagenaud, and Alexander Rossi. I just feel kind of bad for these guys because the race just didn't go their way. It wasn't really any huge mistakes on their part. And then we have Jimmy Johnson. Now, Jimmy Johnson struggled last year for sure. It was his first year in IndyCar, and he definitely made improvements throughout the season. We can kind of see the improvements now. He was a lot faster lap by lap in St. Petersburg this year compared to last year. I think Jimmy Johnson he needs to work out his qualifying a little bit, just put in some really fast laps on a Saturday so he could start better on a Sunday. But he's learning, and I have no doubt that he'll get there. I mean, he's a 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion, so I have no doubt Jimmy Johnson will eventually get the results that he wants in IndyCar. And then one other person I want to talk about is Tatiana Calderon. You might know her from Formula 2. She never really got the results that she wanted. I have no doubt she's a good driver. I mean, there's no way I could drive an IndyCar as fast as her on a track, so
I really have no room to talk.
But she did finish last out of the cars that were still running. She finished ahead of 2 cars, but one of them crashed out of the race and one of them had a mechanical failure. So hopefully, I want to see more from Tatiana Calderon. Hopefully throughout the season, she gets more used to the car and she's able to challenge for some higher positions. I definitely want to see that from her. I think she's a really cool person, and I would like to see her finish higher. I mentioned in the beginning of this video that she had a really cool quote that said "Champions race here," which I think would be a really cool slogan for IndyCar, because that's true. I mean, we got, for example, just 2 drivers, Jimmy Johnson and Scott McLaughlin, who are champions in other motorsports. And then we have Helio Castroneves, who was a sports car racer for a stint. He's also won the Rolex 24 Hours. It's just, we have such a high caliber of drivers in IndyCar. Super talented from all over the world, all different kinds of motorsports. It's just, the field is packed with such good drivers. What Tatiana Calderon said about champions race here is true, and that's one of the reasons why I love IndyCar and why I think this season is definitely going to be worth watching, because if we judge it by the first race, there's going to be some exciting things happening this year. Absolutely. We got a championship battle on our hands. So I highly recommend watching this year's season of IndyCar. If you want to see some champions battle it out on track, this is definitely the motorsport for you. And it has a big variety of street tracks, purpose-built racetracks, and ovals. So there's something for everybody. And you can at least find some of the drivers to just love. I mean, there's so many great characters here. So that was my review of round 1 of IndyCar at St. Petersburg. It was a super exciting race. I really enjoyed it. If I was going to give it a rating, which is kind of interesting to do for a race, it's not like a movie or a show or anything, but I still think you can give it a rating. I would say that St. Petersburg deserves, I'll just give it an 85 out of 100. How's that? 85 out of 100. St. Petersburg, you were a great race to watch. Thank you so much for watching my review of the St. Petersburg Grand Prix. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you go check out IndyCar and watch a couple races. It's super exciting, and it's really close wheel-to-wheel racing. I think you'll enjoy it. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now. If you could like the video and subscribe, that would be super helpful. And again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.